Hi. Everybody looks great out there. Thanks for coming. So good evening and welcome. I'm Bailey Foster, president of Friends of the Knox County Public Library. I'm delighted to welcome you to the 2023 Wilma Dykeman Stokely Lecture. This year it's a conversation between filmmakers Ashley York and Elaine McMillian Sheldon. I have been eagerly anticipating this event, as I know you have. Something about Friends. Friends of the Knox County Public Library is dedicated to fostering a love of libraries, books, and reading in the Knoxville community. We do that through community outreach, advocacy, and support of the library and staff. The Wilma Dykeman Stokely Memorial Lecture, which Friends launched in 2007 in partnership with the library, honors the late writer, speaker, teacher, historian, environmentalist, and friend of the library. This lecture series honors Wilma Dykeman Stokely's legacy by furthering the conversation on issues that mattered most to her. Wilma Dykeman Stokely was a native of Western North Carolina and longtime resident of Newport, Tennessee. She wrote about the Appalachian South in novels such as The Tall Woman and Return the Innocent Earth, and in nonfiction works including Neither Black Nor White, which was a study of Southern racism written in collaboration with her husband, James Stokely. In works such as The French Broad, her award-winning book on the history, culture, and economics of our mountain region, Wilma Dykeman Stokely explored environmental issues years before the publication of Rachel Carson's seminal work, Silent Spring. Friends of the Knox County Public Library is honored to present this lecture with a host of co-sponsors. One of those co-sponsors is the University of Tennessee Libraries, which houses the Wilma Dykeman and James R. Stokely Jr. papers in the Betsy B. Creekmore Special Collections and University Archives. I'm pleased to welcome Paul James, chair of the John C. Hodges Society, who will now say a few words.
Thank you, Bailey, and welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Good evening, my name is Paul James. I'm honored to be the chair of the advisory board of the University of Tennessee Libraries, John C. Hodges Society. And on behalf of UT Libraries and all its friends, welcome to this evening's presentation with Ashley York and Elaine McMillian Sheldon. The Hodges Society is proud to be a partner in this annual event, which carries on the legacy of Wilma Dykeman Stokely. We take great satisfaction in advancing Wilma's cherished causes, including furthering social justice, preserving our natural heritage, and promoting speakers with ties to the Southern Appalachian region. The John C. Hodges Society supports the university libraries through monetary gifts, through engagement with library programs, and by raising awareness of the value of UT libraries within the local community, and also across the state and throughout the world, and for researchers throughout the world. This year is a special year because it marks the 10th anniversary of Hodges Society's partnership with the Cherished Community event, which was created by the Friends of Knox County Public Library. And I want to thank all our Knox County friends and our other sponsors of this event for enriching the literary life of our community here in Knoxville. I also wish to invite you all to become a member of our respective organizations and support our work, and I know many of you do, and thank you. We are truly grateful, and we're so blessed that Knoxville is such a giving community. But it is now my pleasure to introduce Jim Stokely. Jim is the son of James Stokely and Wilma Dykeman Stokely. Jim is a longtime friend of both the UT Libraries and Knox County Public Library, and Jim's going to introduce our speakers. Enjoy the evening, thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's a wonderful gathering, and thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you, Paul. As many of you may know by now, I'm here to do two things: introduce our speakers and also to share with you the best joke I've heard over the past year. Now, one year, I think it was right after a presidential election, I had to say, there has been nothing humorous the past year. But not this year. Actually, I didn't hear this joke I'm about to tell. I ran across it in some of Wilma's notes for possible use in her own public speaking. She actually funded her retirement. She was a world-class public speaker through her speeches. She gave about 30 to 50 per year. So I need to set up this joke a little bit. Last year, Queen Elizabeth, bless her heart, passed away. During World War II, she christened numerous battleships for the war effort. And the way each christening would normally work was that she would say, "I christen thee," whatever the name of the battleship. And then someone would push a button, and a kind of a cable system would carry a magnum of champagne, one of these big bottles, over the spectators' heads down to the ship and crash into the ship. And at the point it did that, the workers, some workers would knock out the wooden stops and release the ship into the sea. Big celebration, and rightly so. It's the war effort, and everybody was feeling that they are, part of the community and could contribute. So at this particular christening, hundreds of spectators on hand. Queen Elizabeth announces, "I christen thee, Godspeed." And the magnum of champagne starts its journey by cable, but it hangs down a little too far, and over the spectators it hits a railing, and it breaks prematurely and just floods out over about 6 or 7 spectators. And one of them is a little 5 or 6-year-old boy just crying his eyes out, and the reporter sticks his mic in the kid's face and says, how are you feeling? And the little kid says, "Godspeed all over me too." So, you gotta realize that there's a whole spectrum of reaction to the royals. There's the royal family, there's pro-royals, there's anti-royals, and there's me. So if you like that one, by God, I'll tell you another one. So my wife Ann and I were playing Scrabble this morning. Our black lab eats some of the pieces right off the board. We take him to the vet. The vet's got him under observation. No word yet. Okay, folks, as long as you laugh, I'm telling these jokes. So last week, Ann asked me to pass her a little tube of lip balm, and I made a mistake, probably the only mistake I've ever made in my life. And I passed her a little tube of super glue, and she hadn't spoken to me since. Wait a second. This crowd's turning on me. I hereby officially quit being a comedian. So I'm seriously pleased that we are highlighting 2 talented female Appalachian filmmakers for this year's Wilma Dykeman Stokely Memorial Lecture. A little known fact about Wilma is that she trained at Northwestern University to be an actress. She lined up a post-graduation job in Manhattan as the initial faculty member of the Finch School's new broadcasting department, but she met and married my father, James Stokely, that summer, found herself 1,000 miles from Broadway, and began throughout the 1940s and early 1950s reading the Modern Library books and writing short stories and just basically reinventing her life. Her writing has always had a strong sense of place, and that place was the Southern Appalachian Mountains, including where we are. Much of her work chronicled the people and land of Appalachia. At the height of her career, she published 3 novels, including the Southern Mountain classic, The Tall Woman. She led workshops on Appalachian history and literature throughout the region. She also taught Appalachian literature and creative writing at University of Tennessee for 20 years. I know she'd be thrilled, really, with tonight's lecture, and that we are focusing on Appalachia through filmmakers' lens. Now I'll introduce both Ashley and Elaine. Ashley York is a director and producer who is interested in documentaries, cinematic journalism, and media as a means for promoting social change and justice. She's worked on Academy Award-winning teams and as a producer on projects that have premiered at Sundance, Berlin, South by Southwest film festivals, others. York is the co-director of the documentary film Hillbilly. We'll be seeing some clips tonight, which introduces audiences to a nuanced, authentic Appalachia that is quite conscious of how it has been portrayed and the impacts of those portrayals. Funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, filmed in Tennessee, Georgia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, California. I don't know how California got in there, but the film uses a combination of personal narrative, regional history, conversations with Appalachians ranging from York's grandmother to scholar Bell Hooks, and unfortunately she passed away, and I'm really sorry about that, to challenge pervasive perceptions of Appalachia, showcasing the African-American Afro-Appalachian Poets Workshop and the Appalachian Media Institute at Appalshop, where queer young adults and other mountain youth find community and refuge. So that's Ashley York. And you will also meet tonight Elaine McMillan Sheldon, who is an Academy Award nominated and Emmy and Peabody winning documentary filmmaker. Sheldon's feature-length documentary, King Cole, premiered at the 2023 Sundance Film Festival. King Cole documents the journey of a coal miner's daughter, exploring the region's dreams and myths, untangling the pain and beauty as her community sits on the brink of massive change. Sheldon is an assistant professor of cinema studies at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And part of this event is to celebrate the resources and brain power and skills and achievement, and the fact that we ought to celebrate that right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. So why don't we give an Folks, I'm done, and I am pleased to present to you Ashley York and Elaine McMillan Sheldon.
Oh, this one? All right. Can you hear me? Great. Can you hear me too?
I can't see you, but it looks like there's a good crowd. Thank you for joining us. I'm Elaine McMillan Sheldon. This is Ashley York. We're going to have a conversation. We have a lot in common. We both make films. We're both from this place we call home, called Appalachia. But we thought a good way to start this might be to show a clip that introduces you to the film Hillbilly and Ashley. Is there anything you'd like to say before we show the clip?
I would like to say thank you to all of you for being here. I know this lecture has been in the virtual format for a while, so it's really meaningful to be present and to share physical space in this amazing theater, which has its own rich history, deserving of a documentary. Thanks to the University of Tennessee, to the library, to Jim, to Anne Marie for all your work. It's just really meaningful to be here, and I just feel so grateful for that. I'm in the film. You know, I know a lot of you have seen it, so you'll learn about me. This first clip is meant to be an introduction to the film, to the intention, and to the method that we used in making it.
Awesome. So if you could play clip 1.
For most people in my hometown at that time, there were basically 2 job opportunities: coal and Walmart.
I work here at Walmart. It gets hard times out here, and it gets rough. Especially during the winter when it's snowing on the ground and you have to get them in the best way you can and just try to make ends meet.
Back in the hills of Floyd County, Kentucky, you'll find some of the poorest places in America.
One road out, Floyd County. That's right next door to Pike County, where I grew up.
Education is the only way out.
When I was 9 years old, I saw this 48 Hours news program, which made sweeping generalizations about people from my region. Like we were all to be pitied.
So this is your room, huh, Roger? It's a little crowded.
Yeah. That show made me feel shame for being from Eastern Kentucky.
During the war on poverty in the 60s, the federal government spent more than $3 billion to build highways connecting the Appalachian Hills to the rest of America. But a University of Kentucky study found that many residents can't even afford the gas it would take to get away.
Every day is a struggle for the things many people take for granted.
That TV news program had a lasting impact on me. It was the first time I saw my community portrayed as poor white trash, a legacy that goes way back.
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
President and Mrs. Johnson board for a trip to the roots of Appalachian poverty in Martin County, Kentucky.
When I went to college, I studied scholars, artists, and activists like Bell Hooks and Frederick Douglass. I started working as a journalist and began to think critically about media.
So, are we ready to roll?
Rolling now,
Okay.
yes.
President Johnson visits Eastern Kentucky as a media event. This image of white people living in abject poverty was much of the visuals that associated with the War on Poverty program.
There was an aesthetic to poverty that was created, and it's what the nation started to expect, what images would look like from this region, what people would look like from this region.
The dirty kids, the run-down houses, the broken-down vehicles. Somewhere along the line, it starts getting woven into your actual identity.
This is our story, Depressed Area, USA.
The photographs were all taken from the windows of moving cars. A symbol right there of how we have been reduced to thinking about poverty. I mean, it's something we see through plate glass.
The war on poverty is complicated. While it helped some people by establishing social welfare programs like food stamps and Medicaid, it led to an influx of volunteers and journalists from around the world. Their efforts were confusing and troubling to some folks, like my dad and his two sisters, who were children at the time living in Eastern Kentucky.
Was one day at school, somebody came in with a truck and gave every student there a pair of shoes.
Just half the gym was full of ugly shoes. And that's what the government, I guess, thought we needed. And it was interesting to have people coming in to look at this area. But it became very evident that it was critical. And we did sit on the porch, and we went barefoot. It was just what we did. So when I see the films and I see the depiction of the poor Appalachian mountain people, it really irritates me because I didn't see us as that.
Poverty that has a white face definitely gives a lie to the whole idea of the American dream, democracy. So we push white poverty into the hills. Most people don't even recognize that there were black Appalachians in these Kentucky hills. I grew up in the hills of Kentucky, and there was a kind of democracy of experience brought on by shared economic status and shared location. When we moved to the city, that sort of raising our own social mobility was very tied to increased contempt for poor white people. I've always wondered about the way in which oppressed and exploited people can turn against people with whom we should stand in solidarity.
That's where my Granny Shelby lives.
Hey, Annie.
Hi, Granny.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm just putting this microphone on me, and then I'm gonna give you a hug. Hi.
Hi, baby.
It's good to see you.
Oh, it's great to see you.
So, the comment about filming life through the plate glass, it's one I remember critiquing a filmmaker whose film was getting a lot of attention at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I critiqued him for not getting out of the car, that he just drove through and depicted this place, and that it takes courage and bravery to meet someone face to face and actually learn about their situation, whereas it's cowardly to drive through, and this is what I said publicly and received a little bit of blowback. We're working in an industry of nonfiction that comes from a tradition of gawking, that comes from a tradition of often pitying and relying on the shame of the people that we're documenting. Can you talk about what it's like to be a nonfiction maker in that space?
Well, when we decided to make this film, I mean, we were so conscious of what we were up against as far as what we were combating and trying to make sense of more than 100 years of these representations. So, you know, at the time that I made this film, it wasn't my first film, and, you know, I knew how to do that, but when I went back, you know, our first stop in making this film was at the Appalachian Studies Association Conference in Huntington, West Virginia that year, and that's where we met a lot of these scholars who end up being featured. And we show up and we tell them, hey, we're here to make a film about Appalachia. And of course, they're like, okay. And of course, I would lead with, like, I'm from there, but still, like, you know, as somebody who had experienced this and had seen these images my whole life, I mean, I feel like this film, the inciting incident for it was with Tom Brokaw when I was a 9-year-old kid who had no, you know, I didn't know I was going to make films, but, you know, it was a real challenge to just work through all of that. And even for myself, right? I mean, this movie's 5 years old this spring. We premiered at the Nashville Film Festival in 2018. So we're at our 5-year anniversary, but it's still, like, really challenging. I mean, even though, like, I learned so much in this film and got to work with my heroes, you know, Bell Hooks and Silas House and Frank X. Walker, and we met during the making of the film. I mean, just, you know, it was so transformative, and it really helped me with my own, you know, personal challenge and relationship to being from Appalachia as somebody who has now lived in Los Angeles for 20 years. You know, but still, like, every single day, if I talk to somebody new, they're gonna say, well, where are you from? And it's rare when it's like a little kid in the pool who's like, where's your accent from? It's really lovely. Like, that happens like 1 in 100, right? So, you know, it's sort of like I was like in it, I was inside of it, I was outside of it. You know, the film is co-directed by Sally Rubin, and she always, you know, regarded herself as an outsider, and I was the insider. But it was like I sort of felt like I was playing both of those roles and navigating a lot of complicated personalities and histories and, you know, just so many things. It's just so complicated, and still, you know, to this day. But we wanted to make a film that was beautiful, that was like, that did no harm. You know, that was rule number one. Like, right. And that's rule number one in my practice, period. But certainly, you know, with this film, like, we led with, we want to do this, and we need your support. Like, it was really important to us to involve the community, not just because now that's the thing that everybody does, right? It's become to be expected in the industry, but I just knew that, like, there was so much I didn't know. Like, I knew the personal, and I knew what it was like to grow up there and to go away and to come back and, you know, to have this really unique relationship. But when we went there, I mean, that's where we met Emily Satterwhite and Barbara Ellen Smith, and Silas House was the keynote at that conference that year. And that's when I realized there's this whole body of work, Appalachian Studies, that even though I lived there for 22 years, I never knew this, right? Like, there was, it just wasn't part of the education, you know, for me in Pike County. So it was a real awakening, you know, personally, but also just to be able to learn and to, like, read these really intensive academic papers about whiteness and race and the Civil War. And, like, I mean, I just was really compelled, and still am. And again, Hillbilly I'm so proud of it, and I'm so grateful it's in the world. And I know that it helps people learn and think about the region in different ways, and to understand that Appalachia is not this monolithic place, but it's the beginning of a much larger exploration. And I feel like it's chapter 1. So for anybody out there who's like, well, what about this? What about that? I know, and we are ready. We are ready to make that. We just got to get the money for it. So, I mean, the funding takes forever. I mean, this film wouldn't exist, and I think this is so important to state in memory and in honor of Wilma Dykeman, who was so committed to humanities and to this idea that it can help us understand each other and to work through our pain. Like, she said that, like that the humanities can help us connect, and pain is how we connect with others, which I really appreciate that. But this film would not be without the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts, West Virginia Humanities, Virginia, all the humanities councils came to support us.
Yeah.
And again, this wouldn't be without them. So I just want to say, that the humanities are so, important, and it's just amazing that, Wilma was so conscious of that throughout her career. I mean, it's like the path forward. I feel like it's the new, when people ask, what is the future? It's like we have to, as your film so beautifully says, we have to use our imaginations, so.
I want to kind of go back to sort of channel 18-year-old Ashley.
18-year-old Ashley.
Where you were leaving your holler. I didn't live in a holler. My family lived in a holler. My dad took us out of the holler. We lived in a town, but from there, and you don't know what you're stepping into, right? It's like when you go to UK, I went to WVU, we both entered journalism programs, and I remember even going in-state to West Virginia University because it's so full of students from Jersey and elsewhere, mostly outside of the state now, being mocked with my accent. I was on the campus radio station, and I remember making a conscious decision, you probably don't hear it, my accent, get rid of my accent. And I learned from my roommates who are from Baltimore, and so I have some weird ways of saying things, how I should be speaking. Talk right.
Talk right.
And so I'm just curious, a couple things. There's a piece about that in the film, leaving, the feeling of being both very proud of where you're from because it's who you are and you're rooted there, you're sixth generation, and same, and so, but also feeling this need to actually shed that, to be accepted into a larger academic community or a larger professional community, and how you navigated that.
I'm still navigating that. I mean, I think about this more than I feel like I should, and I feel like there's going to be this day, or I hope that it's like just kind of dissipates, but maybe it doesn't. Like, I think that's just part of the complexity of being, from where we are. And it's not like being from there, it's just like the way people perceive that, I feel like, is where, where things start to get really complicated. I mean, like, it was day one when I stepped on to campus at the University of Kentucky. I mean, this is 2.5 hour drive, from the east to the west. But that, as I say in the film, was the greatest culture shock that I've ever experienced, because it was just like when I would open my mouth, which Silas says so beautifully in the film, like, it's like being a perpetual immigrant. And people, they just don't know how to negotiate, how, somebody like me could be in the journalism school at the University of Kentucky. And then fast forward when my first film, Tig, was at the Outfest Film Festival in Los Angeles. We were at the DGA, and some guy was like, "Where are you from?" And I told him, and then he just starts singing the Beverly Hillbillies. I mean, this happens, and it's hard, and it hurts, and it's still just this thing that I just think is so important, because I imagine that, I don't know how many students we have here, but, I imagine you folks, and not even just the students, but, I feel like it's this shared experience that we have, so it's not over.
Yeah.
And I am in the academic world. I mean, I'm currently interviewing for some positions, and you better believe when you get on those calls, it's like, okay, and I can feel myself doing it right now. We should code switch, Elaine, and just go
I can't even
full,
hear myself anymore.
We could just do full, it's sort of a dream of mine, like, to just be able, like, what if I could just forget that, and just, like,
totally
speak the way that I would speak if I wasn't so conscious of how I'm going to be perceived if I don't, enunciate or speak correctly.
Yeah. Well, what was it about? I mean, I think what we're talking about is a bit of shame, right? But it's also not everybody that grows up where we grew up gets to tell the story of the region, right? And so what responsibility do you feel as someone who is doing that?
Well, I mean, I was so excited and passionate to make this film, but I was also very worried that it was going to, I just didn't know, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I mean, it's so important I mean, no matter what film you're making, right? Whatever the film is, the documentary, the podcast, I mean, if you're a media maker, like, you have to be accountable to the people that you're representing. And that's the piece that has been lost in the documentation of Appalachia and Appalachian people, I think, over all these years, is that people, zoom in, they don't get out of the car, the helicopter in, the journalists, all of these Christmas in Appalachia pieces, the one that Cronkite's talking about there. And then they just leave and they go back to their editors, and you get in that mode, the post, and you have to make decisions, and you can't always, be as communicative as you would like to. So, I mean, we were very conscious of that, and we didn't want to, we didn't want to make a mistake, but that was also part of us very consciously choosing to raise the money, to go the humanities route. And when you apply for those grants, they make you partner with the humanities advisors, which we did, and it just really elevated the film. I mean, it gave us that framework for how to think about the people that we would feature in the scenes.
Right.
We started with those base interviews.
Right.
Because it was like school. I mean, it was just like, I felt like I was taking like Appalachian Studies courses throughout that research. So that responsibility can't be understated. I mean, I think it's one of the most important questions of this moment in time. I mean, with digital technology and media and misinformation, I mean, media literacy is so important and essential for schools and for kids and for all of us. So, we showed the film to people throughout. That was part of our accountability. We involved, which is very frowned upon in the Hollywood world, when you start involving people who are in the film as partners, as writers, as producers, which you have to be careful about that, of course, but, we initially were working with Silas as somebody we would interview. And then within about a minute, I was like, okay, he needs to have a much larger role on this film, and he supported us with writing. He's an executive producer on the film. But his contribution led us to Bell Hook's living room.
Yeah.
So there's like a give and take with that.
Yeah.
And I just, gosh, Bell Hook's like resting in peace with Wilma Dykeman.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about how personal storytelling plays into this. And I know we have 2 clips to show that will illustrate that a little bit more. But first, do you remember the moment when you felt journalism wouldn't serve you to the full extent that like creative nonfiction would? Because I can share the moment of mine, which is, going to journalism school and learning things from the Society of Professional Journalists, ethics in terms of, not accepting gifts and these types of things. What I learned is that in order to deeply get into the lives of someone to document them, that often means you need to share meals, or you rely on one another in a way that journalistic ethics by the black and white book would frown upon. And so that's when I realized maybe I was operating outside of the tradition that I was trained in, and maybe something more akin to folklore or documentary at the time, which I wasn't super trained in. Do you feel you're pushing the limits of journalism, documentary, and where do you find balance in that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we always want to move forward and push the boundaries. And I feel like that was how we did it in this film. It was enlisting Silas and Sam Cole, and, with Belle we tried, but she was very busy, and couldn't. So we had a non-traditional approach, I guess, in that way. In journalism school, I feel like there wasn't a moment. It was more like this feeling that there was a deeper expression and that there was a subjectivity that needed to be explored, right? This binary, objective approach. I get that, but I also think, and I've never had this thought, it's coming now, but I feel like that's part of how we justify, or how these media corporations have justified telling the stories that they tell, because
they can be hands off.
Yeah, right? It's like, you go do the work, and this happens in TV docs and doc-series all the time. They hire field crews, they send the field crew out, the footage comes back, field crew says goodbye, the post team takes it, and there's not that accountability even on the teams. So that's where an independent documentary just has a tremendous value, because this film, I mean, in fact, we've been developing a series based on the themes in this film, and I was at this TV conference last summer, Real Screen, and I pitched it to an executive, and she was like, this film's not right for us because what I would have to do to it, you don't even want to know to put it on our channel. And she was lovely. Like, we're friends now, and I really appreciated that she just said that. Like, this is not what we're going to do. So, there is that constant sort of negotiating. It's like if you want your movie to be commercial and you want your movie to be seen, that experimentation can be challenging. But for us, I mean, we wanted to make a film that was character-driven, that really elevated the perspectives of people that you don't ever hear about. I mean, Bell Hooks, I read her work as a 19-year-old in college. You asked about 18-year-old Ashley. I had bleach blonde hair. I could do back handsprings and backflips with no hands. I went to the tanning bed a lot back in those days. Did you do that too?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But the tanning beds that were in the DVD stores, did you guys have those?
Oh yeah, Valley Video.
Raceway Video and Tanning.
Yep.
Shout out.
Right. Are they still there?
No.
No,
sadly,
Valley closed too. No, the tanning bed, that was like so essential.
Yeah.
But that was me then, and then I found myself at the University of Kentucky, which again felt like, I think what people think LA feels like to me. Because it was this like 25,000 person campus, and there were one-way streets, and I was so nervous. And then of course, I opened my mouth and then somebody's like mocking me, right? And that was this wake-up call of like, okay. And I just dove into the work. Journalism really attracted me because it allowed me to be curious and express those curiosities and to ask the questions that I didn't feel like I could ask where I grew up, because I kept the peace, status quo. When you're on the homecoming court and a cheerleader and that's important to you, you gotta,
Yeah.
But also there can be a danger, I think, in expressing certain politics, and going to journalism school just really let me connect with people who weren't like me. Like, I think I was just really craving that.
I think I remember my dad apologizing to a dinner guest one time because, my daughter asked so many questions. Because I would just constantly be asking questions. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not that that's like frowned upon in the culture or household I grew up in. It was just incessant. I was just so curious about anything.
Yeah.
Well, I want to show the personal clip. So maybe set up when you realized Hillbilly wasn't just going to be this bird's eye view with archive and historical, but actually was going to be a story about Ashley York and Ashley York's family too, and navigating political situations.
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have? Because
Not a lot.
that is a big question. So the scene we're going to show next is the last scene in the film. I was going to lead with that, but I just wanted folks to have a little more background for anybody who hasn't seen it. So it's a total spoiler alert for anybody who's not interested, in hearing that. But it's the last scene in the film, and it really brings it all together. I mean, we're going to hear a poem from Silas House. We're going to see the people that we've met. But the scene starts with me and Granny Shelby. And what I think is so important about it is that I was learning about my granny, somebody who I've been close to my whole life, and every time I go there, I sit in that chair. Like, that was all very organic and real. But when I became part of the film, I thought it was my family being in the film. Yeah. Like, I didn't want to be in this film. Like, somebody asked me when we were doing a crowdfunding campaign, they were like, "Are you in it?" And I said, "No." I just didn't. And I think that's connected to the shame too, right? Like, I've shed myself of this. I'm a filmmaker in Los Angeles, and I work here, so nobody can know this about me. So there was a certain...
Don't want to be too big for your britches or toot your own horn too much.
Right.
That's a risk.
Yeah, for sure. But I was just really, really grateful to be able to sit with my granny and to understand her in a deeper way after 2016 and after, like what happened. And my granny, I know a lot of you have seen it, but for those of you who haven't, she was a lifelong Democrat. She went to see Bill Clinton when he came to Pike County, and then she got seduced by the former president and manipulated by social media, which is the piece we didn't know. Like that's, one of the heartbreaks of the film is just that we had to finish, but had we given ourselves 6 more months, we would have had that perspective about how all of these corporate media companies were just manipulating everything to the point that it reeled Granny Shelby, in. But the scene at the end becomes about her and me, and it becomes about not just her and me. I mean, it's about this shared experience, I think, of women too, especially. And, again, in the spirit of Wilma Dykeman and the gender discrimination that she had to face as somebody who was doing the work that she was doing in the 40s, in the 50s, as a woman who is writing about the Appalachian Mountains and people. That scene, I think, just really foregrounds gender. And this, which I don't want to give it away. We'll watch it. We're going to watch it. Yeah. We're going to watch the scene. But it's about love, and it's about transcending that. And again, Bell Hooks, of course, her work led her to love. She wrote a trilogy about love. So it all sort of feels like it comes, full circle in that way. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When I was growing up,
Were you responsible for making meals for your siblings and your family?
for Mother and Daddy and all of them.
Wow.
Well, Mother didn't believe that girls should get an education. She wanted me to stay there and take care of the kids and wash dishes and sweep mop floors and stuff rather than go to school. I just wanted to experience life. That's what my dream was, getting out of Johns Creek and go and make something of myself.
I didn't know that about you. I've never heard you say that you had a consciousness about leaving. It makes me feel like I am living your dream in a way,
Well, it could be.
That want and desire that you had and didn't get, that gets transferred to Mom. And then Amanda and I, like as it came to us, we had that opportunity,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for it, Granny. I can't tell you. Just to be able to go to school, it's so meaningful.
Yeah.
Because everybody doesn't get that opportunity,
Our campaign was never about one person or even one election. It was about the country we love and about building an America that's hopeful, inclusive, and big-hearted. We have seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought. But I still believe in America, and I always will. And to all the little girls who are watching this, never doubt that you are valuable and powerful and deserving of every chance and opportunity in the world to pursue and achieve your own dreams.
All right, y'all. We're gonna get a group picture. Hold on. The final screening at Apple Shop is kind of this incredible thing because the community really turns out for the young folks. All right, it's gonna go good. When you live in a community of 2,000 people and when you're young and you're from this community and you're telling a story, it can be really scary. It takes a lot of bravery.
I'm 18 years old and I've lived in a hauler, got a dry fork my entire life. I'm a guy trying to live my life. Filming is like a weapon because it could be used for bad, it could be used for good, but I want to show the good in the world. I want to do something that's going to impact in some way.
Appalachia is a wound and a joy and a poem, a knot of complication. But you cannot know a place without loving it and hating it and feeling everything in between. Something inside you has to crack to let in the light, so your eyes and brain and heart can adjust properly. Those attempting to portray the region must become immersed in the region in a special kind of way. They must go to the mountains, drive these winding roads. They must sit and jaw for a while with folks on their front porches, must attend weddings and high school graduations. They must study the history of the place and come to understand it. They must sit at a wake and look at the lines on the faces of the people, the calluses on their hands. They must understand the gestational and generational complexities of poverty and pride and culture. They must stand for a while outside and smell the air, study the gravestones on the hillsides that await the inscriptions of names belonging to people, not statistics, not stereotypes.
I guess I'm a hillbilly.
I probably would identify as a hillbilly.
I'm a hillbilly, and I'm very proud that I am.
The hills stand for so much that is wondrous and glorious.
Look in the lens.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to leave where you came from to find your voice, and other times you have to return to that same place to listen for a deeper understanding.
I so relate to that wound. And I don't think either of us would be making work about this region if we weren't both in a love-hate relationship with the region. And I think I see it as like a huge privilege to have been born in a place still very rooted by place. You know, I think that we live increasingly in a transient society where we do come and go, and that our transactions aren't always place-based. And to me, home is a place still matters, right? And it still roots us in that way, and the stories we tell about that place still matter. And I just feel really lucky to be an outsider-insider in my own place. Do you feel the same sort of privilege and blessing to have been born in a place like that?
Absolutely. And if there's one gift of Hillbilly, I mean, there are many, but it's that it has helped me reconcile that complexity, to bring voice to it, and to just navigate it, you know? And I love Kentucky. I love my home. I mean, to me, it's all home, right? Whether I'm in Knoxville or East Kentucky or West Virginia or North Carolina, like, you know, it's all home in that way, in the Appalachian regions, you know.
Right.
So.
And people often ask, what is Appalachia? Where is Appalachia? How do we define it? You know, I think I think even your film touches on this. In the early days, it was this majestic, mountainous place that defined us. Then it became what was to be taken from here, the coal and salt and timber. And then it became this story of depravity and poverty. And so the question of what Appalachia is next is actually a question I'm going to leave for the end. But I think it is a very, like, when we think about culture, and Appalachian culture is not a static thing, but it has been put in this time capsule, right? And in that way, it's gasping for air because it can't evolve if we're constantly being shown photos of what we were. So this film, in some way, breathes life into the culture as well.
And was you asked in the last question, like, about the evolution of the film and how it went from this piece that was centered in academics and, you know, this real theoretical framework to this film that is very dynamic and vibrant and that features people in the world doing things, reading, learning, making films, you know, all the many things that we see in the film. So I just appreciate it so much, and the people and the healing, you know? I mean, just as you said, to show up, like, people are afraid of that. And I think that's like a human condition thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that that's just because somebody went to Appalachia. Like, I think it's just, I guess they're confronting their bias. Maybe that's what it is. Like, they don't want to do it because they don't want to be challenged. Because it's like, if you do it, you know, it really, you know, it can really, you know, it can just really change things.
But there are benefits from being from an underdog place because you have each other's back.
That's right.
And you immediately, you know,
That's
when
right.
I'm anywhere, if I meet anyone, if I see someone with a flying WV on their hat, which you see worldwide, or anything related to Appalachia, I just go right up to them. And I remember I had a assistant with me one time working, and there was someone, she was from New Hampshire, and there was a volunteer group from New Hampshire. They were not in New Hampshire. We were actually in West Virginia. And I was like, they're from New Hampshire. You should go talk to them. And she just thought, like, no, why? Like, what? I don't know them. Why would I go talk to them? And I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around that, because if I find out anyone from around me, I mean, obviously I live here now, so many of you guys are from around here, but if I'm outside, and so there's this kinship in being an underdog, but I would like to see that evolve, and for us to not be seen as this underdog, right? And so that's a cultural change, I'm hoping. But we can keep the, like, scrappiness that underdogs have, because that's what I love about that.
That's right. I mean, the history is, you know, like, the history is there, and the future is, I mean, it just depends on how, you know, like, if you want to look at it optimistically, which I do. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist, and that doesn't mean that I don't have days where I really struggle with that, but, you know, I have hope for, I mean, it's not just Appalachia, like, because I feel like Appalachia is America, right? The story of Appalachia is the story of America, and of course, we've become more just globalized, and I mean, it just feels, I mean, you can sort of feel it shrink, right? The world in a way, and like, I feel like with media and the stories that we have access to. So I just want people to continue to show up and ask questions and like navigate the pain. Like, I was reading, I don't know if it was a reading of Wilma's or if it was in one of the clips, but she talked about pain and how pain is a way that we can relate to others. Yeah. And it's like, if we could just sort of shift our thinking and lean into that as opposed to the judgments of a place or the people, when we're really, I mean, you can go to any state in this country. I mean, come to California, and there are plenty of rural pockets. I mean, this is not unique to, you know, this is not unique to where we're from. And, you know, one of the big learnings coming out of the 2016 election, which I mentioned, was that, you know, we didn't know for a while the impact that all of these media companies had on, you know, fueling what happened. So, you know, we just have to keep connecting and learning and growing and not knowing. Like, I think that's the thing. Like, when people, we were talking about this, that like people say, well, what is it? And it's like, if you don't know definitively what it is, then there's nothing, you know. But there's, you know, I have so much hope for, I mean, it's really our country, you know, that we can deepen our understanding, you know, as I say, and just, you know, move across those boundaries and have respect and kindness and like not be so judgmental, and just try to understand who we are as humans, right? Like, in the spirit, when we started this film, I remember I was like, humanities, how does that relate? You know, we want to go for this grant, we have to figure that out. But that's like what the film did, is brought forward these people, these amazing just beings in the world. And we had such an amazing opportunity to spend time with them.
Yeah. We're at 8.
We're at 8.
So we have 2 clips. You want to show your final poet clip? Or do you want to keep talking?
No, let's not. I think we should. Do we have to stop? Is anybody, I know we have a Q&A. We want to leave plenty of time for the Q&A, because that's important. And I'm always so curious what people think and what they want to share and ask.
Anna Marie is making signals with her hands.
Is she? We can't see anything. It is true. When the stars on the stage are like, I can't see anything. It's really true.
I think she's giving us a thumbs up. No, can't see. Can you holler? Okay.
We're okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I love when we talked, and you said to me on the phone, you were like, you know, there aren't a lot of us.
Yeah.
In a time when it feels like, you know, everybody's a documentary filmmaker and everybody's making media and everybody's telling stories, you know, but that just really, you know, stuck with me. And I think that your film, you know, King Cole, I think it'd be great to show that clip too and talk about how we intersect. Do you want to do that?
Sure.
I mean, you queued it up. I mean, we have
we have a clip.
We
from
have
my film.
the poet scene, which I'd love to show too, but we definitely won't have time for the last one.
So this clip is from my film, which just It's not out yet. It's just premiered at Sundance in January. And it's the first film I've done where it has personal storytelling narration by yours truly. So yeah, let's watch it. Pawpaw.
I know, Pawpaw and Granny. Isn't that another thing we have in common, Elaine?
I know. I love my elders. They teach me so much. I mean,
Yes.
Pawpaw's like the greatest. He's everything. He's like a former miner, a steward of his own land, a grave digger, a volunteer everything, because he operates heavy machinery at 88 years old, and works every day and is just honest and doesn't believe in things like greed and consumption. I mean, he's just taught me so much about what it means to sustain simple life in a mountain community. So, yeah, Pawpaw.
Or anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
There's this idea that like mountain people are these simple people, but they're like everybody. I mean, again, like you can't. It's hard to generalize, right? That's so hard when you're like trying to generalize, like Appalachia, which is this region that stretches from New York to Alabama and is home to more than 20 million people. I mean, this is an enormous population of people.
But I think it's harder to live that life in other places. I feel like Appalachia there are pockets that are holding out in some ways to allow you to, I mean, in LA, it's really hard, right? Like, it's hard to, like, carve out, everything is so fast. Or do you feel that? Every time I visit, I feel like...
You know, I feel like I've been in LA for 20 years now, so it's like my holler now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like this or that. Like, it's just, you know, it just becomes so familiar.
That's true.
In a way, when I go home now, I'm like lost, you know? I think, I mean, LA, it's like anywhere, right? Like you know, Silas's husband, he says it so beautifully in the film that you can't just look at a place through rose-colored glasses. Like, if you're being honest with yourself, it's gonna be complex. And I feel the same way about Los Angeles. I mean, of course, I can sit here and talk about how much I love LA and have built a life there, and I met my husband there, and we have a baby in a house there, and like I work there. It's great, you know, but like LA has its problems of LA and the media culture. Just all of it, you know, again, we don't have to digress into that, but you know, I feel like we're more similar than not.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I feel like just as human beings, like, you know, that is what it's all about, is like, how can we find common ground with people? How can we relate? How can we think differently? That doesn't mean we have to agree. I mean, we're certainly not all going to agree, but we can listen.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So what does the future look like for your future work and what you hope to see in depictions of the region?
Well, I mean, my future work, I definitely want to include continuing this work. You know, I mean, we would love to make, I mean, I get emails not every day anymore, but like, where's Hillbilly 2? What do the people think now? What's going on in Appalachia? You know, so I know that, you know, people are very much interested, and I would love to do that work. I've been doing some creative work with Crystal Good, who is featured in your film and also in the Poet Scene, which we're not going to show. I'm so sorry because of time. But, you know, I definitely don't look at this as sort of like a one-time thing and, oh, that's it, I made my film, because there's just still so much.
Yeah.
And I feel like that'll be a life endeavor for me just to continue. And maybe when I stop is when I reconcile it and realize I'll never solve it. You know, not that I'm trying to solve it. I'm just, you know, I just
internally you're trying to solve it.
I guess so.
Yeah. And I feel like the best thing I personally could do is to just be honest about the good and bad.
Yes.
Right. And that's a constant reconciliation that you can never reach the bottom of. And as long as you're not wearing rose-colored glasses and romanticizing, and you're being realistic about these changing forces, I think the stories just only get deeper with time. So, all right, we should have Q&A.
We should.
We have a microphone here.
We can see you now. Hi.
I got the mic. So if you have a question, I'll bring the mic to you. That way they can hear you. Question. Oh, hi.
Hello. Hi. This okay? Kind of afraid of the microphone. I am a narrative filmmaker from southeastern Kentucky, Clay County.
Clay County, sure.
Yeah. I would give you the name of the town, but I doubt you'd know it. I'm just curious, with some of the modern images that you had in Hillbilly, do people ever question you about that? The houses, the cleanliness, things that we don't see in the normal media review when we see Appalachian?
Like, did people ask where the poor, stereotypical, like, white
Yes.
trash people? With Hillbilly, no, but interestingly enough, so Hillbilly led to a commission by the Smithsonian for a short film that we have now finished and was on display over the last year called Appalachian Futures, and it's all about the future of Appalachia. Sorry, there's so many directions to go in there now. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was just wondering if people questioned the
Question it, right,
images.
right. It's like I try to bury it. I think it's like trauma response, you know? Because at one of the first shoot we did, we were with this fellow. He wasn't the credited DP on the film, and we were in Huntington, and I was like, let's go film some scenics. It was twilight, you know, beautiful sunset. And of course, he's like, okay, let's stop there. You know, and he was like filming all of those images. And I said, please don't do this. And it was a point of contention because he didn't understand. And again, like when we make these projects, like you can't assume unless you tell your crew about the history or the people or any cultural considerations. So, you know, on that point specifically, no, but the Smithsonian, right? Sorry, I digressed to the Smithsonian, but it's important because when we submitted the treatment to the Smithsonian, it was based on this group called the Stay Project, which is a group of folks from 14 to 30 who are imagining a new Appalachia, thinking about how can we create a community where youth can and want to, can and want to stay. So we submit that to the Smithsonian, and of course their note was, where are the poor white people? And we said, okay, we've got something for you. And we pulled out of an archive a scene that we had cut from Hillbilly. And, you know, we restructured it, just pulled a few bits of it, but it very much fit that note that they wanted to see. And, you know, again, the Smithsonian, I mean, a commission from the Smithsonian, it's like a dream come true. It was great. And, of course, we're going to listen and, you know, work with them. And I'm glad that footage did make it into the Smithsonian and that it is, like, you know, up against, you have that duality once again. It's not just, you know, a bunch of young folks, 14 to 30, who are trying to figure out like what the future is and how do we stay here, how do we thrive, how do we live. So, you know, I think that was important. But again, it was hard to, you know, reconcile that. And that's just this constant negotiation that we're in as filmmakers, you know, when you deal with whether it's executives or grant program officers. I mean, it's a collaborative process. And you know, that can't be understated. Like the fact that these works aren't perfect and you have to leave things behind. You know, the question people ask most is, why don't you cover religion more in the film?
On the first note, I think context is the big, I haven't seen the short, but, you know, when I hear that, I don't think either of us would say we're trying to pretend like the pain and suffering of Appalachia doesn't exist, right? We're just trying to portray it in a way that's sensitive to the people who are actually suffering, right? And so I think that contextualizing the landscape of what's going on is showing part of that pain, right? And so doing it in a responsible way is the answer, not just doing it as, you know, wallpaper for your entire film. So yeah, it's a good question. Thank you for that.
This is perhaps a side note, but I teach about music from this region and play music from this region, and I was really struck by the soundtrack. I enjoyed that you made a choice that was different than so many films, but talk a little bit about how you chose to not use a lot of traditional music and to have a new music soundtrack. I was interested in that.
Well, thanks for that question. I always appreciate when composers are recognized. This film was composed by John Fee and Ben Cucci, who we were so fortunate to work alongside. to help us also understand. I mean, we knew that we didn't want it to be the Deliverance banjo, because that's in the film, and that has to be earned. Everybody's waiting for that, But what they were able to do so beautifully was to use traditional Appalachian instruments and to modify them and to, just do all the magic that they do as composers to make it sound contemporary and new and unique, but yet, staying true to those instruments. But we were very clear about that. That was like the first thing I said in the meeting. It was like, watch it with the banjos. With all due respect to the banjo, I love the banjo. I'd love to learn to play it someday, but, even Tom Brokaw. Tom Brokaw in the 48 Hours title sequence, which is a cue that is, they put a banjo under it because 48 Hours happened to do something about Appalachia. They were like, just throw that banjo under our theme song. I mean, it's like just the audacity that some of these producers have. I know. Gosh.
It's a great question.
I don't know. Yes, great. Thank you. But we do want to release the soundtrack. That is something that is a goal of mine as part of this just 5 years later, because the music I just think is so wonderful, and Silas's poem and Crystal Good and the scene that we didn't get to take a look at. Her poem is so beautiful, and I just want that to be another piece that we can share.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Dale.
Hi, I'm from this area and can relate to what you all are talking about. I wasn't able to come to the screening of the film. Where will we be able to see this film?
You can watch Hillbilly. Our contract with Hulu just expired. It just left the platform, unfortunately. So it's not there, but it is on Amazon. It's on Tubi. If you can handle all the ads of Tubi, you can watch it for free. If you connect with me after, I'll send it to you on Vimeo. There are a few DVDs out there for sale, but I want you to see it, and I'm more than happy to send you a private link if you come and talk with me after. But
it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Okay. And on other platforms, the sort of third-party platforms.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yes, wonderful. Through the wonderful library system here. Look at that. Just let's give it up for the friends of the library.
Don't watch it on Amazon. Watch it on the library.
That is exactly. Sure. Say that again, Elaine.
Don't watch it on Amazon. Watch it on the library.
Yes. Yes. No, but truly, this library, it's been wonderful to know that they're so active and vibrant and just keeping this lecture series going. I know it's not easy to be a librarian these days, so.
So question, I've heard some people say Appalachia is a state of mind.
Oh.
If you believe that in any way, what several adjectives come to mind for each of you?
State of mind?
Wow. It's a tough question. Appalachia's a state of mind.
I think of like a practical joke. That's a state of mind that I feel like I associate with Appalachia, like a good practical joke. Someone's pulling a prank on you. I think like a neighborliness, knowing what's going on with the people around you, and even if you don't have a whole lot, you're helping them. That's something that my papa does and teaches me to do. Go ahead.
I like living, breathing, learning, that's what I think of when I think of Appalachia. Like, I don't think of it as of course we have a unique perspective and sensibility from being there, but I just feel like the people in Appalachia want what every American wants.
Yeah.
They want to be able to thrive and to live and to work and to be able to buy a home. And, these problems are, they're universal, in that sense. And Yeah. It's a tough question, Jim. Tough. You are.
My question's more around TVA. I noticed that you didn't mention that, but you know, TVA had a role in the community. In some cases, you know, it uprooted entire towns, which are underwater, and displaced people. So how do you think the impact has lasted? And by the way, no one in my family could ever play a guitar, much less a banjo.
Questions about TVA. Are
It
you
was a
familiar
little hard
with
to
TVA?
hear the last part of the question. I know, what was the last part of the
Displacing
question?
communities. So when TVA was going through building dams, whole communities were displaced.
Yes.
Yeah, among other things, yeah.
Which I am not an expert or historian of the TVA. I mean, I certainly, you know of that. I mean, I think when I hear that question, what I, immediately go to is it's just, again, people sort of coming in with no regard for the people or the community or the environment. Wilma talked about that in one of her talks too, how people are just divorced from this idea of like the environment and humanity. And she said, the way we treat each other is a reflection of the way we treat the environment. So, I was so moved by that. And I think that these projects, economic development, and, she also talked about that and how, like, that can be really dangerous when you're talking about money and how do we develop that as opposed to how do we create a community that can thrive.
Yeah.
And a community where an 18-year-old Ashley York, I don't know, like, again, I wasn't told, like, I wasn't a person who was like, oh, I just want to leave, I've got to get out of here, oh my gosh. I was told by my parents, like, there's nothing here for you, you have to go to college, period.
Mm-hmm.
I applied to one college, University of Kentucky, and I got in, and then, that was my story. But again, that's just one, that is my story alone, and I just think that's so important to say too, as grateful as I am for the opportunity to be here and to talk about this work and these ideas. I am one person, and I can't, speak for everyone. I can do my best to try to think about what they might think, but, it's a real complicated topic and place and people.
I think the TVA, I'm less familiar, but I do know that in the same way, early exploratory of the coal fields and timber in my home state of West Virginia, where, people would come in, survey how much was there, what it would take to get it out, all that, and then the second round of people that would come would be sociologists and anthropologists who would then write reports about how the people there were living substandard lives anyways, and that this would be better for them anyway. And so I would imagine that then fed into the images of the war on poverty. So it's a cyclical thing of representing the region as a place that it doesn't really matter what happens to the people, because the people, they're lucky to have what they have, and we as, a larger, nation or world will benefit from this, which has been true, right? The whole world has benefited from the resources of this region. And so I think it goes into that. It goes into the narrative that Hillbilly is, sort of unwinding of, when you represent a people as being a single mind in a single place, then what is there to save? And why not just take? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's a great question. It's a complicated
It is, yeah, definitely. And I think it speaks to story.
Yeah.
Even the stories that surveyors or people who go in and document what they see.
Yeah.
And their judgment of that and their understanding of the history of the region and how it came to be that way.
And not necessarily seeing them as just evil, right? They had their idea and dream and vision, but it was all complicated at that time, and we can't know what that time was like really until we look at history. So, yeah, it's much easier to say, these corporations are bad people and these are the good people and these are the two sides, but I think it is quite complicated, the complexity of desire for resource, the need for this progress, and all the people that get left behind in that is a real question.
Mm-hmm. when we make the series, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into Tennessee
somebody's
Valley
exploring it, I'm
Authority.
sure.
Yeah, I'm sure too.
Okay, so my question is about the humanities. I just loved what you said about the value of the humanities. And I just wanted to hear more. Like, sometimes there's a misconception that it's just for fancy pants or it's just a luxury. And I love the way you said, like, it's for everyone and it's vital that we tell our stories. So tell us more about the humanities and how it guided your approach.
I mean, you know, I mentioned that when I started this film and we were going for this grant, and I was sort of like, okay, how do we get the National Endowment for the Humanities grant? You know, and I had a lot to learn, you know, about how to do that. And then fast forward to, you know, the last few months when I've been reading Wilma's work and learning about her and about her commitment to teaching and how that is a pathway to social justice. Humanities are a pathway to social justice, reconciling pain. You know, these are all ways that we can be better and all ways we can transform, you know, we can transform what we believe and what we know. I mean, the arts, like from when I was a kid, like I very clearly remember seeing the art programs go away. The music program, right, is gone. It just kind of goes away, and it's as if it's just disposable. And of course, often these are disciplines that are taught by women. And, you know, I just think there's a real gender bias in that also, and the funding, and we just have to support our arts and organizations and hope that they can hold on, because without it, I mean, what are we left to do if we can't ask questions and talk about who we are and why we think the way that we think and how we can think differently. And I just am so grateful, you know, to the NEH and to all that they do, and, you know, to all of these groups. But Wilma talked about that. It was really, she knew that. I mean, she was such a trailblazer, this Wilma Dykeman, you know, writing books and traveling and speaking and teaching and just showing up, you know, like she just did the work. And I think that's what it's about too. You know, you don't just make a film and all of a sudden everything changes. Somebody asked me that recently on a Zoom. They were like, well, what do you think? Has everything changed? And I said, until you hear somebody who talks like me on the news, no. You know, and that's like because again, like that's what I really wanted to do as an undergrad. Yeah. Like that was my dream. Was that yours?
Yeah.
Did you want to be a news anchor?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh yeah. And then did you say, I'm going to be a reporter? Because
I wanted to be either Oprah or Katie Couric.
Okay.
Either one.
You were like, I'm going to New York City,
Yes.
like, or Chicago for Oprah.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
you were ready to be the host. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm living my dream. I'm kind of like Oprah right now.
You are, right? I feel like, yeah, that's great. I know the chairs.
Do not clap for that. That was a terrible joke. Okay, any more questions?
My question is for the 9-year-old girl who saw the 48 Hours and the Dan Rather Open.
Yeah.
How is she now, and did you inoculate those things that needed inoculating?
I mean, that was heartbreaking. Like, it's one of the earliest memories I have of being heartbroken, which was hard, but I think the real hardship of that is that there was never any discussion about it. Like, it was one of those shows, you know, and back then everybody tuned in at the same time to the same shows, and then everybody went to school the next day, and I just remember, like, it was like everybody knew it. Everybody knew that this program had gone out, that we were once again being looked at in this way, but yet there was no conversation about it, which I think speaks to the arts and to the lack of media literacy and to the importance now, right? We have to think about what can we do to make this better now, to ensuring, you know, that we are teaching kids to be literate with media and teaching people how to talk about what they see. I mean, that was the gift of Bell Hooks as the 19-year-old Ashley. When I read her work, she said, like, you know, there needs to be a feedback loop. You can think critically. The way these projects get made, like, it's systematic. It's all part of the white imperialist, capitalist patriarchy, you know, as she always so beautifully said. But there's systems, you know, But the 9-year-old, have I reconciled? I mean, I still carry that with me in some ways, absolutely. I mean, I would be being dishonest with you if I said, oh yeah, I'm over that. Like, we can move on, just because it's like, I mean, that's, life in LA will show you that every day, I mean, and not just like LA, it's like just if you travel, which, like I know Wilma, she traveled a lot, and I've been thinking about her, and like, how was she treated, and was she conscious of this? And, like, I feel like we're all like sharing that experience in that way. So it is a work in progress. I am a work in progress, for sure. But it's, I'm happy to do the work, and I want to continue to do the work, because I know I'm not alone in that. As much as I'll say I don't want to talk about everybody, I know that there are millions of us who feel this,
Yeah, and for me, the conversation around stereotypes has changed so much in the past decade, because I think I was fighting it externally with work before, and fighting to prove to someone who believed wrong that they should believe a certain way, and I've since changed my fight internally to empower the people all around me to actually wear the guard against this, right? So it's about literacy, but it's also about imagination, it's about dreams, it's about not allowing, because the fact is, I remember being a kid in Logan, West Virginia, like, you see these reports, and it's damaging to your psyche.
Oh yeah.
To see that this is your community depicted in this way. It really limits, unless you're from a very strong family that's raising you up, like, it really limits your idea of how you function in the world when you see this depiction, because it just cuts so deep and it's so personal, and you just feel so lacking. And I think that my fight for too long was trying to fight against those external beliefs that I think are really difficult and maybe never will change. And so since then, I've just decided internally, how do we build up our own strength against these, to not only build a shield, but a way to talk about it that moves the narrative, moves the story, and not just there's one story. It's not a replacement story. Oh, this is the story of the past, let's replace it with this, but it's all of our stories. Yeah, because I think that's resilience. It's not the changing one person on the outside, or getting permission from them to have a broadcaster with an accent, right? We're not going to do that. We're not going to get permission, so we have to build the shield and educate our young people to speak.
That's right, Elaine. They've got to talk right. Not right. No, Elaine and I were talking before about how, as journalism students, it was the radio.
Yeah.
Like, that was, I have this, like, one of those scars is, this is the 19-year-old now again, but being in the radio station, it was the NPR affiliate, which was right there on campus, and we had a class where we were required to go in and write stories and read them on the news. And I remember sitting there with the gentleman who was assigned to me. I think I just kind of blocked him out, because he just kept saying, read it again, read it again, read it again. And I think, like, that's probably the point when I was like, I started working in newspapers more. I mean, I was still doing the TV journalism thing, but it all just felt empty.
I changed my major to writing.
Yeah. And it felt, look at us, Elaine, all these commonalities. It just really changed, like, who I thought I could be.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the power of these stories. And also understanding, like with my granny, the reason that scene is so important to me is just because I didn't know that about her. I knew she was always trying to get out of the flood plain and to get the government to buy her out. And it was this decades-long struggle of them, just the floods and the mess and no money. And she always wanted to get out. But I didn't know that she wanted to be a flight attendant and to, like, go out. And, I'm always thinking about these unrealized lives that people want and don't have the access to or opportunity to, and just how transient that is. We're so quick to judge people and assume what they can do or can't do, but if we could just open our mind and give people opportunity and, like, be generous, I just think that's what it's all about.
Part of the movie that you focused on was the run-up to the 2016 election. And I remember you were sitting with your grandmother, I think, and one of your cousins, and they were giving you a hard time about voting for Hillary Clinton. And did you gain any insight into why the region was so strongly for Trump? And before you answer, would you may not want to, but would you identify the little guy at Walmart who was pushing the carts around?
That's Billy Redden.
And what's his significance?
Well, I don't want to, I mean, I know some people haven't seen the movie, and it's sort of a reveal in the movie. Talk to me after if you really want to know, and I'll tell you, but I don't want to spoil it.
I think he knows.
It's a nice tease.
Yeah. Can I just say it? He's from he's Deliverance. He's the banjo playing young man in Deliverance. That is Billy Redden, and he's, in the film, he was like the first call that I remember making about the film, because I was like, we can't make this and not explore Deliverance. My dad loves Deliverance. It's like his favorite movie ever. He loves. We interviewed him, and I remember he said that. Yeah. But sorry, so the first part we were on Billy Redden. What was the first part? Oh, the 16. Okay. Well, again, we can't. Elaine and I just talked about this in the back about how, there are certain questions there's just no answer to. How does the region feel about Donald Trump? I mean, I can tell you where my Uncle Bobby is. He has moved, he's moved into the Q space. Q is what he calls it. He's totally, it's like he's moved on, I think they're sort of bored with him, frankly. And, we haven't talked about it in depth, but, my Uncle Bobby, again, is one person. I know there are plenty of people who wish they didn't vote for him in the beginning. Again, when we filmed this and when we had to put our pencil down, we knew, 60 million people voted for him. 4 million Californians voted for Donald Trump, right? That's like the population of West Virginia, right? So it's like those numbers are all over. This was not just Appalachia. And you notice that people don't do that anymore, right? That was the reason we started documenting the election, was because, we started this film in 2013, the research. And then nobody was thinking about the election. It came up. I thought, well, this is a cool opportunity for us to bring our cast together, see them doing something in solidarity. Of course, I thought the night was going to end with me and Silas and Belle and Sally and our whole crew square dancing because Hillary Clinton became the president of the United States, but I was very wrong. And we never once asked ourselves, this was a blind spot in our process, what happens if she doesn't win? And that's why when I'm sitting there, right, you're referring to that moment when I'm just sitting there, because I was like, let's just get out of here. Let's let Hillary win. That moment was actually, because we were filming both days, but it hadn't been called at that point. So I just think it's important to say that we can't essentialize. We can't that's part of what Hillbilly 2 would be, or a series. I would love, love, love to continue that work and to think about where people are politically now and how they do feel. My granny, she did vote for Donald Trump a second time. But again, all my other family members, they were liberal progressives. They didn't vote, they voted for Hillary. So I think a lot of people sort of take away that everybody in the film's for Trump, but they certainly weren't.
After the release of the pilot.
All right, thank you for being here.
Is that Kaz?
No, this is one of my students. Thank you for being here.
After the release of the film, how did your relationship change with your community just because of the film?
It's deepened. That question makes me want to burst into tears because, being here, as an example of the way that this film has been received. And this is 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
It shows me that we upheld those key values that we had of don't do any harm, make it beautiful, make it honest, And then the personal part came later. This was not a film that I was in. You know, it was just by process and by really the demand of the film required that I step up and say, I am from this place. And that was really hard to do. I mean, still, like, it's, you know, it's like still, you know, a challenge, as I mentioned. But, you know, the film, there have certainly been critiques. If you go to Amazon, you read some, you know, the liberal garbage comments, one of my favorites. But I think a lot of those comments, like, my opinion of them is that it's people who saw a film called Hillbilly and they thought it was going to be one thing and it was something quite different. You know, I think people often remark on the, you know, the feminazi. Somebody called me a feminazi? I felt really proud of that. I really did. In the comments, I sure did. I just saw that one not too long ago.
Don't read the comments,
yeah.
Ashley.
I normally don't. Like, I can't even remember why I was. Like, I think I was doing I don't know who knows what the reason was.
Never a reason.
But it wasn't in like a despair. It was just like, what? It's sort of amusing, you know? But I'm glad, because that means they learned something. Like, if they took the time to write to me to say that, that means that this film, whether they liked it or not, it doesn't matter, but they were able to question, you know, what they thought. And again, I think a lot of that's the gender discrimination and the bias and just the way that, like, you don't, like, when I watched your film, you know, I was so moved by the narration and just the fact that, like, you are a maker, you're a woman maker, and your voice. You know, when you think about all these other histories that we've been told by Cronkite and by Brokaw and by these suited up professional journalists who are so objective, you know, like, that is what is so magical, you know, about it. And, you know, the film, I mean, overall has been so well received. I mean, we were worried, like, we knew, like, we would get the film out to rural audiences and within Appalachia, but we were concerned about urban audiences. But we wanted this film to be commercial. We wanted it to be seen. We wanted it to have an impact, you know, and reach people outside of the region, and it did. I mean, we had an impact campaign for that. Like, we specifically designed a campaign that would help the film, you know, get in to the more urban markets, you know, because we were still up against the bias. Like, the same bias we faced in trying to get funding from all the usual suspects, you know, was the same bias that we face in trying to, you know, get the movie out. But people really love it. I mean, we were at the LA Film Festival. We won the jury prize at the LA Film Festival. Like, I couldn't believe it. Like, I almost didn't go to the awards that morning, you know, because it was early. But I was like, well, I'll go. And we won. And that premiered at the ArcLight. Billy Redden came, for anybody who's wondering. People often ask, did Billy ever come to LA? Because he says it was his dream. He did. We did a crowdfunding campaign, and we brought him. He and I went to Warner Brothers and did the tour, and he kept going up to everybody, and he said, have you seen Deliverance? You know, like, he was so proud. He brought pictures, and he signed them at the event, and you know, that was a real special night. But I mean, from Alaska to New York City, the film was part of the American Film Showcase. You know, we showed in Prague, we showed in Colombia, in South America, we showed in Uganda. I mean, and no matter where we show this film, people say, I see my community in this film. And whether that's a community that's exploiting people or oppressing people, like, they, you know, people just really relate to the themes in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry. We've got 2 more questions, and then we've got 2 more. And then we'll have a signing after this. So if you'd rather ask your question directly to them, you can do that.
I was curious how you found your way to California. That just seems like a really brave move for a young woman.
You know, moving to Lexington, Kentucky was no joke. Let me just say that. That was really challenging. You know, I was a journalism student. I worked in, you know, this is right at that moment when we started putting the newspaper on the internet. You know, I did radio, I did TV, I did all of the student media that was available. And I was just craving, I mean, and it's just this theme that keeps coming up, and now, you know, I'm seeing the same thing, but it's just sort of these corporations, you know, and just the importance of them having diverse voices. And often when we talk about diverse voices, we don't talk about rural people, you know, or people who come from, come from the holler. But, LA, I applied to film school. I applied to the University of Southern California, and I got accepted, and I packed my Volkswagen, and I had $1,000. I didn't know anybody, but I had admission to USC. And I've been there ever since. But I had the institution, like that was the thing. I didn't feel, like granted I didn't know anybody and it was LA, but I had already gone through that in Lexington. Like the whole, being so nervous. I was like sick, you know, as an 18-year-old, because I think that was the moment when I was just confronted with what the world thought of somebody like me. They didn't know me, they didn't know anything about me, except that I was in the journalism school and, you know.
Didn't talk right.
Didn't talk right. I was hoping Elaine and I could just code switch.
We're just like constantly.
We're just
say
doing
talk
it.
right.
Are you doing it?
No, I can't hear myself.
Okay, well they're going to ask you directly, so.
Okay.
Thank you
That's
all.
it.
Oh, great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ashley.
I'm clapping for the audience. How'd we do? Are we, is that it? Okay. Well.
If you're wanting to stay to meet Ashley York and Elaine McMillian Sheldon, you'll go out the doors and up the left staircase, and they'll meet us up there.